Alright, now that you know how to use Google Forms, let's quickly discuss the actual questions you need to ask. So first off, just remember to include instructions wherever it's necessary. You need to make sure that at no point when someone fills in your form, they are unsure about what to do. Not only should the questions be phrased clearly, you need to include instructions of how many options they are allowed to choose, what each end of the scale means, whether a question is optional. I would actually put that in brackets. I know you can mark it not required, but people don't necessarily pay attention to that. So please, you can almost not include too many instructions. Proofreading it is critical, not just for the mark's sake, the fact that it should look professional for the project. It's also because of the people you want to send this to. Preferably, you shouldn't just send this to people in the school. Preferably, you should get an adult that you know to send it to maybe some of their colleagues or something. It's good to get a wide variety of people's opinions, and then you just get more interesting data anyway. Now, family members will not be comfortable in sending something like this to colleagues, friends, and family if it isn't professional. And one of the main things that makes this questionnaire professional is that the spelling and the punctuation is correct. There's no space before punctuation marks, and no space before a full stop, no space before a question mark, a capital letter at the start of sentences, things like that. And I'd recommend you first write your questions in Word and actually use the spell checker in there, just to help you make sure that it's all good. Alright, so you're going to start off with basic biographic or demographic questions. Name and surname, if you want to include it, has to be two separate questions, because in Access you will lose marks if it's one field. So keep it separate. This has to be optional, and depending on the kind of questions you ask, you may want to choose to just leave it out completely. So if it's any kind of sensitive questions, and maybe you want to ask a question whether someone actually has ever littered themselves, if I gave my name, then I'd probably not be comfortable in answering that. I'd probably not be honest. But if I didn't give my name, then lots of people would actually then answer more honestly. So think about that. It's not necessary. Gender is a must. It's not just about getting extra information. It's very important to be able to see patterns, to see, all the males said this, the females tend to say that. It's very good in finding patterns in your data, this demographic questions. The date of birth is very good to ask, and we rather ask the date of birth than the age, because there's a lot more calculations that we can perform on date of birth. It's also good to have a data type that is a date, because of what we can do with it in Access. So please use date of birth rather than just asking them their age, so that we can calculate their age ourselves. If you want to include more demographic questions, you can go search online what other kind of demographic questions are available. But please don't include unnecessary things. Only include something if it's really relevant to your questionnaire. Now, your actual questions that you need to ask, it has to be a minimum of 5, and I'd say try not to go higher than 8. People tend to get annoyed and they just give up on a questionnaire that's too long. So stick with just the core questions that you need. Try not to go higher than 8. If you have an unusual topic that's not very obvious and people don't have a good general knowledge about it, I would include a short, easy to understand definition or the description at the top of that section. It's important not just to copy and paste something from Google. Never mind the plagiarism. Your average person who reads that, if it's a definition that sounds too technical, they literally just stop reading. They'll give a few words and then they just give up on it and start with a questionnaire, even though they don't understand it. So you've done your phase 1. I'm quite sure you have a thorough understanding of your topic. Just provide a short definition in your own words that's easy to understand and simple. You need to aim for questions that result in a variety of data types for Access. So even though a yes and no question is a good type, you can't have 8 yes and no questions. You need to have a variety. So some questions need to result in plain text. This will probably be something like multiple choice or checkboxes, preferably not short text, because we don't want people to enter whatever they want, because we want closed questions so that we can analyze it in Excel and Access. You also want questions that result in a number. The scale question is the best for that. And you may use more than one. You don't have to have just one. The big thing is that you have to have a variety. It can't be all the same type. Yes or no answers or true or false questions are also very good. Don't include a maybe, because otherwise we can't use the data type for yes and no. If you want, and if it's appropriate, you can include currency. Just be careful of that. It's a bit forced with this topic at some point. If you want to ask them a question about how much they would, for example, donate to a company or to an organization that deals with a specific problem, specify whether it's a once-off or a monthly payment or something like that. But don't force it. Don't ask it if it's not absolutely necessary. I don't think that's a must. You can definitely go without it. The big thing about these questions are that you need to ask people about their opinions, their feelings, and their behaviors. You can't ask them factual questions. You can't ask them what is the cause of global warming. You can ask them what they think the cause is of global warming, and don't just let them answer anything they want. You have to give them the options that they can choose from. You can include one where they can type their own answer, but try to provide as many options as possible. So this is all about people's opinions about a specific topic, how they feel about it, do they care, do they give a damn, and what their behavior is. Do they do certain things to prevent this, or to try to help this cause or combat a specific problem? So I'd recommend going, whatever your problem is, go and look what the average person can do to help and just to combat this problem, and ask them if they do any of the following already, or if they'd be willing to, because in that sense you're actually using this to help spread the knowledge about the topic as well. So just remember, it has to be closed-ended. You can't ask people to write their opinions in words and sentences. You have to give them either a scale or options to choose from. Just be careful, don't ask obvious questions. People get annoyed with that. Do you know what is recycling? Yes, I don't think there's a person over the age of 10 that doesn't know what recycling is. So that would be a silly question. There's no point in asking that. So try not to ask questions where you know absolutely everyone will answer the same thing. If everyone's going to answer yes, or everyone's going to answer no, then don't ask that question. You need to anticipate all the possible answers, including not applicable. So if you ask, for example, which of these do you recycle, that's already presuming that people recycle. So you have to include an option about none of the above, or it's not applicable or something. Anticipate what people could possibly need as an option there. And try to avoid emotional language in a question. Don't ask, how bad do you think deforestation is? You're already saying it's bad in the question. So, or what do you think about the terrible consequences of global warming, or something like that. Don't do that. Don't put emotional language in the question, because you're basically leading the person to an answer. Try to keep it as neutral as possible. In the scale, you can have, if you do a scale question like that, you can have the two opposite ends, have a word that's a bit more emotive. But the question itself needs to be straightforward. What are your feelings, or what are your thoughts about a specific topic? And on that note as well, be careful of pictures that are too graphic. People are very sensitive to pictures, especially of animals suffering. So you don't have to use, I know with like the ocean pollution and thing, there are absolutely horrific images of animals that are stuck in plastic, and I know that's bad and it's a good way to illustrate it, but people really get upset about that. So rather don't use that kind of picture. You're not raising funds. You're not the organization trying to get people to do something about it. So it's not your responsibility to make people feel bad about this. It's your responsibility to gather their opinions and actually get some insight into the problem. So avoid emotional language and emotional pictures. And then remember to ask one question at a time. You can't ask, do you recycle, and what it is you recycle in the same question. It has to be two separate questions. just be aware they call it double barrel questions. It can't be two questions in one. You can't say, do you play sport and what sport do you play? That's two questions in one. If you're running out of questions and this is a specifically difficult topic or something like that, and you really need some more questions, you can consider a short general knowledge test. This is where you do ask people factual questions, but you specify that this is to test their general knowledge. So you'd have to make a new title and a new heading and actually say a test on general knowledge, where you can give them, I'd say, a maximum of 3, really not more than that. 2 to 3 questions, true or false, or a multiple choice statement. That's really, really simple, easy questions, but it's a way to test the public's general knowledge. You can ask any kind of basic facts that you've now found out in your study, in your first phase. Just keep it simple. It shouldn't be so difficult that someone who is interested in the topic wouldn't already know it. It needs to be general knowledge. All right. If you need some more help on ideas for questionnaires or for the kind of questions you can ask, you can consult one of these 2 sources. They're quite good, especially the WikiHow one gives you lots of good tips. All right, so next step is now to plan your questionnaire, actually write the questions. I would, as I said, recommend doing it in Word. Ask family or friends' opinions on your questions. Ask your teacher for some help. Check that your questions are really good. Even though the questionnaire doesn't count that many marks, it really forms the basis for your whole phase 2. So it really needs to be of a good quality. Ask people's opinions, and then when you're sure it's of a good standard, you can put it into Google Forms and send it out to people. Remember, you need to get 25 people to fill in your questionnaire. It has to be 25 or more. If it's literally one less than 25, you do not get that mark.